Okay, everybody, come get in your seats. We're ready to get started for our last, but not least, panel. I would like to, and I'm thrilled to introduce Vanessa Morrison, president of Fox Family, and we're going to be talking about developing diverse talent.
Thank you. So I'm thrilled to introduce my esteemed panelists and colleagues. First is Cara Speller, an award-winning producer of animated film and television at Passion Animation Studios. She also enjoyed a 17-year partnership with the animated band The Gorillas, producing the bulk of their visual work.
Yes, that's great.
Next in line is Marae Soria, who's president of Paramount Animation. She previously co-headed DreamWorks Animation and produced hit movies such as the Madagascar franchise. Next is my colleague Andrea Maloro, who co-heads Fox Animation. She was previously part of the senior leadership at Sony Animation, and prior to that, Andrea was also an accomplished visual effects producer. And Ginny Gilbertson is the Swedish Film Commissioner for Children and Young People. She was also head of development at Yellowbird and associate producer and script editor on the Emmy Award-winning Millennium Trilogy. So let's get right into it. I think first and foremost, I want to start by solidifying the case for the urgency of gender parity and diversity. And it's a question that has come up earlier, but I want to ask it to you guys, which is, why does gender parity and diversity make good business sense? Let's go down the line.
Starting with me.
Yes.
Well, it seems like such an obvious thing, doesn't it? It seems like such an obvious question.
It should be, but I'm not sure it always is for all people.
Well, I think unless you're making films or television series for an incredibly small audience, you can't afford to be, if we're just talking about it from a business perspective, you can't afford to be niche in your team either. Mm-hmm. You know, if you bring a wide team of people together from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, you get more complex and interesting ideas.
Mm-hmm. Marae?
Well, you know, at Paramount Animation, the goal is to do a diverse slate. But the meat and potatoes of what we do are those big tentpole movies. Those are big 4-quadrant movies which appeal, you know, to everyone. So they're universal themes. So I think that on one hand, while we want to say we want to appeal to everybody, in order to make them special, we need to know what appeals to everybody. Mm-hmm. And then at the same time, if we keep making the same stories all the time, we'll fail. So I feel like it's finding those unique voices wherever they are, and that comes from diversity. So I think that's the path to success.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to add to Marae, it's a global community. And to get a diverse group of people, you have diverse voices, which gives you the better story. So I think we always have to look outward and to be inclusive. And I know those are keywords, but I really think that's what elevates everything, and we have to do that. It's obvious, but yet sometimes not done.
And it's also important that you just don't get the female alibi or something, that you have representation on the screen, but you also have voices behind the camera that can represent that unique voice and that storytelling. And I think it's not just something that is about justice or equality, it's about the future of the film, because it's like she said, it's not, if you keep reproducing the same stories, then the film business is dead.
As a woman and as a woman of color, I've often found my uniqueness to be a superpower rather than a hindrance of any way. And I think it would be interesting to go down the line and hear some of your personal experiences in terms of how being a woman or being different, being diverse, has contributed in some unique way to a creative process or your creative process or some business success, but how diversity and gender parity has actually affected your process.
I think it probably affects me on a daily basis in ways that I don't necessarily pick up on. But I do remember one year I was invited to speak at a conference in Stuttgart called FMX.
Mm-hmm.
And I was invited to the CEO Summit, which was a meeting which was meant to be a room full of CEOs talking about how business was, where the business was going, what the challenges they were facing on a daily basis. And it was about 35 people in this room, and I was the only woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I was surprised initially, but what it gave me in that room was that when I spoke, everyone listened.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I was different, I think. And yes, I know what you mean about superpower. I quite enjoyed that as an experience, actually. Although it would have been lovely for half the room to have been female, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can sometimes use that to the best advantage, too.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Well, I'm a mutt, Belgian-Bolivian Jew from Cleveland. So I think that has always kind of served me in that early on, I think I had an aversion to groups because I didn't think I fit in.
Mm-hmm.
My ex-colleague and friend Bonnie Arnold cured me of that, as she's the joiner of the
Mm-hmm.
world, and got me to join everything, which is really great. I think that it makes you, it has served me in that, thinking outside the box, living outside the box, growing up in a very bohemian kind of household. I feel that it allows you to really listen to people's stories in a different way and not see genders. When we talk about, there's been so much talk about diversity and inclusion and all of that, and I have this fantasy that, and I remember feeling that as a younger person. I'm also the oldest person in the room, by the way, but I remember feeling that the goal should be to not have to one day not talk about this, to be able to talk about the rights of the individual,
Mm-hmm.
the worth of the individual, because as much as I am unique and you are, we are all unique, and we all have stories that are unique to us, and yet that's what joins us, what binds us. So that's my hope, that someday we'll get to that point.
I think after spending most of my early career, a good 15 years of it, in rooms filled with men, and only men, and I was always the little girl at the table, and did my job diligently, learned from a lot of people what to do and what not to do. I came into the wonderful world of animation where there were a lot of women, not as many as the men, but they were women, and they were in charge, and I realized that there was a different way of solving solutions, and I think that's the thing. If I had a superpower, some people would say I am flat out tenacious, and you have to be if you want to get your stories told and your movies made and you want to move things forward. But I also think that there's a great strength in what I think comes naturally to females.
Mm-hmm.
They if there's a challenge, they find a collective solution.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much as an arm wrestle and I'm going to be the stronger. It's about what's best. And I think that's the part that we innately bring to it. And I think that's the thing that I rely on a lot, is just, you don't have to be the biggest or the loudest voice in the room. It's how do you bring together the collective so everybody has a voice in the room.
Okay, I'm new in animation, and since I work with the funding more than doing animation, this is a little bit new to me, but I worked a lot of years in crime, and done a lot of stories or contributed to doing a lot of stories about young women getting killed in the beginning and then
Wow.
solving that problem. And I'm so relieved that I'm not doing that anymore. Because once you get those glasses on, it's very hard to take them off. And I think that's what's happening now also, is that we all get those glasses of consciousness of gender or diversity, and it's so relieving, because I think this is really going to change. And as I said, once you get those glasses on, you never take them off, and that has influenced my work now as a, funding films, and you see character designs that are all white, and I can't meddle with the content, and I shouldn't, and I don't, but I can still ask questions. Is this conscious, or how does this reflect the story, and blah, blah. And that's, I think some of the questions have made a difference, because it's not always conscious from their part.
We've talked a lot today in general about the unique challenges faced in terms of increasing the numbers of female directors and diverse directors. And I find it interesting. I see that we've achieved, I think, more milestones in terms of female representation in the executive ranks and the producer ranks, probably. And I'm curious, A, why you think that is, and B, kind of what are some of those unique challenges that we face in terms of increasing our ranks of female directors and showrunners?
Sorry, where did you start? What was the first bit?
Well, you guys represent this.
Yeah.
We have made some milestones, some would argue more milestones in terms of female parity in producing in executive
Yes.
ranks. And what are some of the unique challenges in terms of those milestones in increasing the ranks of female directors? And what are some of the unique obstacles faced by women trying to get to direct?
This is something we think about a lot, and I think confidence plays a huge part, actually. We have a section of the company called Passion Presents, and it's a very small roster of exciting young talent that we have spotted either through our relationships working with the schools or people posting things online. And we put them up there for people to see what we're finding exciting about the next wave coming through, the next creative wave coming through. We put out a call when we set up this roster to the RCA, which is the Royal College of Art in London, which we know has at least 50% female students on the course. And we put out an open call saying, we're looking for young talent, we're launching this new collective, please respond, we want your ideas. We didn't have a single response from a female student.
Wow.
And the male students responded instantly, within a day, 2 days, 3 days. And we had to actually go after every single female student and say, we haven't heard from you. Are you sure you're not interested in this? Are you, and it took an awful lot of encouragement to actually, that there was so much doubt in themselves that they had to get over, that they wouldn't be good enough or it wouldn't be interesting enough. And I think we need to do everything we can to support that.
And where do you think that doubt comes from or came from? Do you think it was something, is it just societal, or is it something that we can do something about, perhaps in terms of that training in film school? Where did you see signs of kind of the root of it that would be helpful in terms of ameliorating it?
It's really hard to pinpoint, isn't it? I don't know whether, I can only imagine that all the students are getting equal encouragement at school. otherwise there's something very wrong going on there. But, maybe it is, men seem more likely to, we were talking about this in the last one, to grab the mic.
Yeah.
And women kind of sit back and wait for the right time, or don't feel that they're ready, or I don't know how we can support that other than, as we did, like actually going after them and forcing them to enter something.
Marie, what do you think?
Well, for the first question, to go back to the first question, as far as like why there are more in producing executive roles, I think that it's an easier transition from live action to go. So I think that's more obvious, I should say. Though we've been working hard, like with writers and directors actually, to come from live action, find ways to make that work. At Paramount, I've been there less than almost a year now, and we have our team in place where there's 10 of us, 9 women and 1 gay guy, and 50% diverse, so that's great. And, on crewing up, and also the next 4 movies that we're doing, there's 3 have female leads, and the 1 guy is a sponge. And, what? He's asexual, I'm sorry, I didn't say he's not. But actually, and crewing up on that, Ramsey Naito, my colleague, has been spearheading really, SpongeBob has been a traditionally male franchise and behind the scenes, and working hard, and Ramsey's working very hard, and we're changing that on the movie. I do think that, with directors and what you're speaking to is that I think it's a societal thing. I have found, and I've gone out and it's creating an atmosphere that's nurturing. I think also the other reason why there's more women in production roles, in producing and in production, is that that we are more nurturing and supportive. Though some days I want to go, come here, let me nurture you, so it's like. But I think that is a stereotype also. So, but I do think that the women, I've talked to many friends and colleagues who, production designers, story artists, and we do have to they don't, well, I can't do it, and so we just need to make sure that we support them in every way possible to do it. I heard this thing not that long ago on NPR where some study where it said that if there's a job application, like an application, women, if they don't have 80%, something like it, don't quote me on the numbers, 80% of the requirements, they don't go for it. Men have 20%, they go for it. It's true. Yeah. It's bizarre, but it's true. And I do think that is how we just have to change it. We have to, make people feel comfortable in speaking up, and that if they fail, we're going to be there to catch them.
Andrea, what do you think?
Well, as you know, I came from live action into animation, so I agree with Marae that it's definitely an easier potential transition. But I also think that we tend to then put people in a box. We silo it. It's like, okay, so you're going to take the coordinating route, and one day, after a very long period of time, you'll become a producer. And we don't look at what the other potential qualities that they had. There's producers that have gone to art school, and maybe they want to do something different. I think it's opening our eyes. At Fox, we actually have a barista who I like a lot, and I see him, every week. And his name is Joe, and he's an animator. And he did Animation Mentor and everything else. And, I'm spending a lot of time talking to Joe about how he actually gets to do that for his life, because he happened to mention it. There could be 15 women on the lot that I don't know of that haven't mentioned it to me. And I know inside of Blue Sky, we're really making an effort to mentor. Like just looking and mentoring, just not even just out of the art schools, because there's just, a threshold of entry there that it can be quite costly, but going into the schools, it's one of our big things now, is just like going into the schools that may not have access and creating more access points. And I think if we do that and people really can speak up, but it's like, to your point, are the women going to speak up? So we have to be able to get them at an early age, I think. And it doesn't matter who you are. It's like, if you want something, speak up, because as I tend to tell people, I don't know you're sitting behind your door waiting for me to knock. You're going to have to come out and tell me, or make yourself visible. And then it's a lot easier for me. I just don't have X-ray vision. So I think that's why. I think that's some of it.
But you also have to create that environment so
Yeah.
people know that they can speak up and they can do it safe and with confidence. So I think that is a structural thing. And it's also interesting because when I started producing, before that was a lot of discussions about, well, they're all male producers in the business. And then around the time when I started producing, it was like, oh yeah, now it's getting more and more equal, so a lot of more female producers. But then people started talking about, well, it's not really there that the power is. So before, it was a real power function as a producer, but when the female producers started getting in high numbers, then it's, well, it's not there that the power is. So let's discuss the script writers and the directors. But I think there are so many things to be done. We can, I mean, at the Swedish Film Institute, we count, so we are aware of the support we give out. Not exactly, we don't quota. We don't do quotas, but we do count after the decision in a whole. How many men, how many female that get support. And we have this initiative 50-50 by 2020. And that has worked out great because the support we give is on a general basis. And in Sweden, you can't do films without the Swedish Film Institute because we are such a small language speaking territory. So it's equal. But what we see is the next step in that is trying to get the bigger budgets for the females because it's still unequal in that sense. That the lower budgets are more to females and the higher budgets are more to men still. And the market scheme that we have is more for men because it's, yeah.
So there's the issue of directors and creative leadership, but I also think, to animation specifically, the notion of how to make sure that creative and technical positions within the animation crew itself, and how to make sure there's diversity of all sorts and gender parity in an animation crew is important as well. And one of the things I wonder is, what are the challenges specifically, just throw that out, in terms of gender parity and diversity in an animation crew? And how does hierarchy, the role of hierarchy, function to either help or hurt the notion of bringing in more diverse people on an animation crew?
How do you mean?
Well, an animation crew tends to be very hierarchical. You know, they're leads, they're juniors, there's a system in place. Do those kind of established systems help in this struggle? Do they hurt in this struggle? Is it harder to come in because of the established nature of an animation crew? I'm curious about how the system itself is either helping the cause or not helping the cause.
Right.
Can we go down the line?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's obviously important to make sure that you have that gender parity at all levels. So if you're talking about setting a good example, obviously we spend a lot of time talking about directors as talent, but in animation, you know, even more than, well, in all filmmaking, it's an enormous collective effort, and there are heads of department at all different levels. So it's not something that we've spent a huge amount of time putting structures in place to ensure that we achieve that, but I was looking at our crew for, we have a TV show with Disney that's currently in production, 101 Dalmatians. And we have 35 people in London, and it's entirely 50-50. In fact, there's slightly more women than men. And that's not just within, it's not within the expected roles. So, you know, we have men in production, we have women in editing, we have an even split in storyboarding. And that wasn't, I can't claim that this is a huge success on our part, that we went out and strove to find exactly those right numbers to make it equal. We didn't. We looked for the best people we could find. And then, speaking as a producer, you know, a huge part of your role is to put together a team that will work together well. And that, just by its definition, is a team that is diverse on every level. But, you know, I think it's, I don't know why that is either. I don't know whether we're just lucky being in London. That's, you know, it's a very diverse city. It's a real cultural melting pot, and maybe we're lucky that it's a city that attracts lots of young talent from all over the world. You know, we have, in those 35 people, we have more than 15 different countries represented. But I think it's about leading by example. I think it's about showing more junior people that more senior people can do those roles that are like them.
Murray, what's your experience in terms of animation crews and achieving, or the obstacles to achieving both gender parity and diversity in terms of increasing numbers of people of color?
Right, well, it's kind of tied into what you initially were asking as far as the structure of hierarchy in animation. And it's kind of, this is a philosophy that I started to develop as a producer. At DreamWorks, I produced 7 movies in a number of half hours, and then oversaw a couple. And I kind of feel like, I do feel, that you have to define the structure based on what the needs of the individual, of what, you know. So let's say you start with a director or producer. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. What are the strengths? Where do they need support? So you staff up, you crew up around that. So I think that each movie is kind of try to develop it by what the story is and what the needs are on that crew. At the same time, when you think globally, what we're doing at Paramount is we do the front end, so story, art, editorial, and cinematography on the lot, and then we're partnering with companies all over the world. And what that does is a number of things. It allows us to really broaden the voices that come to the movie that we're able to work with. And gives a, you know, I like that we're not going to have one style. The style is driven by the vision of the filmmaker and the story. So I'm hopeful that, you know, in addition to very concretely saying, we want to do this. So I think that there's internship programs. I think that you can, you know, while we're not a school, at the same time, we want to bring in people who may not have the opportunity otherwise to do that. But hopefully globally, and you know, technologically, anymore, it really is, I have this basic belief that it's not where you are, it's who you are. And the technology, more and more, and eventually I think in 5 years completely with the cloud, will allow us to make that happen.
Andrea, you've worked with many crews in animation and also in visual effects. How do you see kind of, I feel like the kind of strict hierarchical structure can often be a barrier to entry for people. How do you see kind of breaking things down and taking down some of the walls that allow people to come in?
I absolutely agree with you. I think there is a barrier. It just, in my history of producing different mediums, let's face it, here's the thing about the hierarchy, and if there's a barrier. For a very, very long time, all those supervisors in lead roles have been men. So, and it's not that the men are just looking to hire the men, there are just more men in there. And you know, everybody wants the best person for the job. But it's also great when you get your friends in, because you're building communities on these films. So it tends to trend one way. And you have to be really conscious about that. So, for instance, at Blue Sky, we have our first female director who's going to be directing a very big musical for 2021. That's the other thing. So you look at the directors and you look at, and we love Karen Disher. She's wonderful, and she's been at Blue Sky for, I think it's 15 to 17 years. That's the other thing. You have to look at how long it takes you to get the shot. So there's a barrier right there, you know, and you have to have a lot of, I just had this conversation where, you know, live action, these films take years. So live action, you're flipping when you're a director or a lead or a supervisor. It's faster to move up in the ranks. When it's animation, you have a lot more experience before you ever get your first shot at directing something. And I think it all comes back down to the conscious effort of finding it. So we're fully committed because we don't have parity. Rob Baird, my co-president, and I sit there all the time going, how are we going to fix this? For the last 7 months, we have literally consciously, almost every day, spoken about this. We have a great recruiting team, and we're just going to make if we can't find them right off the bat, we intend to grow them. We're going to get invested in people. We hope they invest in us. And even if they invest in us in a little bit, or they don't invest in us at all, we feel like that just makes us a stronger community. Because the animation, we have to bring about this change.
And to that point, maybe, you know, a lot of conversation has taken place today about the sense of belonging. It's not just enough, you know, to be invited to the party. You have to have a sense that you belong there. Are there things that we can do on animation crews specifically to increase that sense of belonging as we're trying to navigate whatever those barriers are that have been obstacles for entry?
It's a tougher thing to know how somebody feels how to belong. So a creative, supportive space has to I think be the start of that, because I was odd man out for a really long time, being the only girl in the room. You have to know that you're okay. You have to feel like you're safe enough or be bold enough to speak your mind.
I think it's the bold enough. You've
Yeah.
got, and again, not being an asshole, excuse my language about it, but
You can curse, go for it.
yeah, it's true.
Exactly.
Producer. Yeah. But I think it's being bold enough. You know, I kind of came up in live action as a development person and all that, you know, and got known as a creative producer, whatever that is, you know. So, you know, it's not like you get the title and somebody says, now you're creative. You have to have a voice. And I think it is also creating the atmosphere. If you're always sitting in editorial, whether you're a coordinator or a supervisor or a PA, you're there, I want to hear your opinion. I want to hear how you think, you know. So it really is letting people, it's your voice, speaking up.
It is. It's a boldness, and it's the speaking up, and I just said at lunch today, thankfully, I was never afraid to get fired. And I think that's a thing. It was like, okay, if you don't want to hear what I say, then you will stop paying me and I will find a better job. That's literally in the back of my head, because I worked in a lot of crews that were tough in live action. It was like, okay, if you fire me, make my day, I'm going to go find a better job. And I don't know what made me think that, but I did.
But that's good. A healthy sense of entitlement is probably what's... No, in a good way, in a great way. I think that's important.
And
Directors
Vanessa would know.
No, directors have to have a healthy sense of entitlement, and I think creative leaders have to have a healthy sense of entitlement. It doesn't mean that it's arrogance, but entitlement in the sense that you deserve to be there.
Yeah, and you work hard to be there.
Exactly.
Every single person in those rooms works really hard. You breathe rarefied air because so many people want to be there, but you work really hard to be there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Cara, you've nurtured a lot of creative. Today, I was interested to hear a couple of directors talk about that transition from being a member of the crew to being a director, and the difference in terms of how people perceive them, a difference in terms of how they perceive themselves, and a difference in terms of the kind of authority and sense of important entitlement that they needed to be able to kind of command the project or command the room.
Yeah.
What kind of advice can you give to people going through that transition?
I think one of the most important things is, and we do say this to our crew a lot, you know, if you are in a junior role, or actually if you're in a role that you don't want to be in, if you have a story, if there's something that you want to do, just do it. Like, find a way make that story, to produce some beautiful artwork, to get it in front of the people who, you know, to your point, Andrea, who may not know that they're there, may not know that they're behind that door. Because you have to show it to people, that we can't mind read. And then our duty is to, when we see that, to be able to actually follow up on it and make something from it.
And Murray, in terms of the notion, you've seen many directors kind of ascend to that place, as have you, Andrea. What are some of the what advice would you give in terms of, you know, having to take the helm and really move from being a part of a collective to leading a collective?
I really think, I agree with Cara. I mean, fastest, if there is a fast in our world, you know, but in animation, is to bring your own story, to do, you know, to pitch ideas, to see, because I think there are great heads of departments, but what I find is it's not everyone that can think of the whole movie, keep the whole movie in their head, and I think that is really the difference for me in seeing a director. You know, it's like, and then again, if they have a great vision, again, how do we support them? Which is how these teams come on, because these movies are so big that can work. Though I don't know that I believe. You know, I think I'd rather give strong heads to somebody who has one strong vision and perhaps brings the story to you. Otherwise, you really need somebody who can keep it all, you know, look holistically, think holistically.
Andrea, when somebody gets that opportunity, how do you support them?
The first thing I honestly tell them to do is breathe. Like, just take a deep breath, and then somewhere into the 6 months, I always tell them to buckle up and hold on, because they're in for the ride of their lives, because then all of the reality sets in. But it is being able to, first I try to team them up with, when they get the break, it's great to think that you can cast to have stronger leads and people around them. And I mean from the very beginning of like having who they pick for their assistant, all the way to who's going to be doing their layout and their visual effects and all the supervisors. But what they have to be, to Maria's point, mindful of what the whole thing is. And because it goes on for so long, they lose track. And you're constantly, you know, we always have this joke, there's no such thing as a green light. It's constantly blinking yellow because you're constantly changing everything. The script is never done. You're improving. You're throwing things up on reels. You have to be able to breathe through all of it and keep your team motivated. And then really what we try to do is support them when we know that they're the ones that are getting slammed, when they have that look in their eye of like, I don't know where to go right now. I think I've tried everything. And then just taking a breath and going back at it. That's what we do.
Ginny, can we talk about the Swedish Film Institute specifically?
Absolutely. I just want to add something, because when you give a male director the opportunity, then doesn't he also have this, oh my gosh, I'm going from this to this, and he gets in a dry tumbler and wonders what, so I just give more female directors the chance, and they will live up to it. Some will, some won't. It's the same with men.
Yeah.
So just give them money.
Definitely.
Give them money. Give them money.
So we talked a lot before this about the unique kind of things that the Swedish Film Institute is doing. Can you specifically talk about your job at the Institute?
Well, my job as the Institute is a film commissioner, so I give out support to children and youth films, and that is, you know, separate. That's my assignment. But at the Swedish Film Institute, we have a CEO, Anna Särner, very aware of gender, diversity, and we also have a assignment from the government that it's one of the goals with the film politics that we should have a diverse and equal film production and show a broad perspective of stories, because it's state funded. And as I said, we can't do movies without state funding, so it's really important. So we have this specific assignment from the government, and it's up to us to see what we can do about it. We have a long tradition of equality in, gender and the struggle. We're not there yet, but I was thinking when we talked about lightening up for women to have families, that would be impossible to say in Sweden, because the question is lightening up to parents to be parents, either father or mother, because you can't lay that responsibility just on mothers. We're both mothers and fathers are parents, and if you get equal opportunities, and then it's better for both parties. So it's a definition, I think, very
I
important.
think we should all move to Sweden.
Yeah, definitely. Here's to Sweden.
It's not just about the women working harder or faster,
Yeah.
because then they break.
Yes.
It's about the fathers coming home and doing some work at home also. But we are at the Institute, we are counting, as I said, so we are aware. We are also visualizing the women, because one of the things that they say is that, well, there aren't no female directors, there aren't no female scriptwriters. So we did this database, Nordic Women in Film, with I think 1,000 women in creative functions, scriptwriters, directors, and producers. So no one can say there is no one. So you can look them up and see the bio CVs and so on. We are constantly doing initiatives for like creating networks for female directors, for example. We had one initiative, or now we're starting an initiative for female scriptwriters. I know that our CEO has threatened to dedicate a whole, the whole market scheme, it's 2019, just for female directors, because there is the biggest challenge, because the more commercial movie, the higher budget is, the less female. It's a threat, she says that.
Well,
It's
that's
not,
that was the interesting thing I found talking to you.
Yeah.
The notion of mandates, the notion of, what some would call quotas in terms of percentages, and the way in which you use data as awareness to let people know what's working or what's not working. How has that, the creative community, responded to that? Has it been is it a controversial thing? Is it not a controversial thing? Or
It is a controversial thing, of course, because changing structures that has been there for years is always controversial, because some lose power and some gain power. So it is controversial, but on the other hand, we can also show that this has been successful in a lot of female directors now have got a high quality index, actually higher than the male directors. It's not just about that, of course, I know that, but it is one way of looking at. So it's what the Film Institute said was that this is not about justice. This is about quality. So we broaden the perspective. We get more stories. We broaden the audience, and that enhances the quality, because that's also a regular comment, but that isn't so, because we've received many prizes and festivals and reviews that shows otherwise. So.
one thing that you said was that the Swedish Film Institute had really spent some time thinking about what the definition of quality is.
Yes.
And can you say the
we
three...
do, as a film commissioner, or at the work that the film commissions, we are 6 or 7 film commissioners, and on that note also, we are very diverse as decision makers also. It's a mix between male and female, and ethnical and color and so on, so that's also very conscious. Sorry, I forgot the question.
The three qualities that you told me
yes.
that you
We
kind of live by.
We have defined quality as the three words that we use and we must use when we want something to be supported is we have to write comments saying that we want to support this and this is why. And the quality words that we use is relevance, craftsmanship, and originality. And that is not, I mean, you can use those in so many ways, but it's not necessarily linked to a lot of experience. It's not necessarily linked to a gender. It's about the story and how it's relevant to an audience. So we keep working at the definitions of quality, but we are at least aware of when we give out support, why we want to give out support based on those three words.
Kind of pivoting off of that, for the three of you, how do you judge material? And in judging material, how do we make sure that unconscious bias doesn't seep into our evaluation of what stories deserve to be told? Andrea, you want to start?
So how do we evaluate our stories? And like how is it unconscious bias?
I thought it was interesting. The Swedish Film Institute has this notion of relevance, originality, and craftsmanship, which in essence kind of sets a bar and causes you to think about the kind of stories you want to tell.
Yeah.
In terms of judging stories, how do we keep our minds open so that we're judging the stories and getting the most diverse stories possible and not allow kind of unconscious bias or, you know, what we think or we've seen before as being valuable seep into our consciousness?
It's big. There's so many levels to it. So, you know, unconscious bias, just being aware of it and just thinking it through. You know, it's who are your lead characters and really just casting towards what makes the best story is one of the things. So when we go through a slate of films or if someone's pitching us an idea, it's really what the essence of that story is that makes us feel passionate about it, or there's something there. You know, Rob will always look at me and I'll look at him and go, yeah, there's something in there. And we're not really at that point thinking. We're not judging. We're looking at what the potential is of what the story can be. And then when we start drilling down in it, like, you know, the project that we worked on where our male character was African American, and somebody said to me, well, how did you pick that? And I was like, we didn't really pick it. It was who the character was. And we never thought differently. We just didn't. And then I think it's educating also and I mean educating the whole crew. Like we spoke of earlier, we went through a diversity and inclusivity workshop. And we put all of the creatives in the workshop plus as many more, and we're going to keep doing it. Because when that became apparent in the room, every single filmmaker in the building called me and said, okay, we're looking at the story differently now. It's educating, because whether you know it or not, it's there. And I, for one, like Marie said, I can't wait until it's not there. It's like, what's the best thing for the project? But as far as picking it, I think we all have to be conscious about it. But first it starts with the germ of the idea. And then we go from there to really make it so it, you know, so we get rid of the unconscious biasness of it. It's like, you know, not everybody that is African American has to be portrayed as the kid that got left. That's just wrong. You know, you have to, or, you know, whatever demographic or everything, it's just wiping those away. That's how we do it.
Marae and Cara, how do you guys pick stories?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because, as we were saying before, I think if we do what's been done, we'll fail, right? So yeah, it's always looking for the original voice. And at the same time, what I love about animation, a couple of things that I think pertain to the question is that one is it's kind of, I always relate it to workshopping a play. You know, we have to start with a great idea. You have to be able to go to green light on something. We need, I believe in a script. and the script isn't necessarily like in live action, it's not 100% there, but you need to see what the movie is, and then we get to put it up on animatic and storyboards and develop it, workshop the play, right? So I think, though, it is, and the other thing is we go to, you want to create, we get to create worlds. So that is a global thing. That is saying, what have we not seen? What cultures have we not explored? And the canvas of animation allows that. I do think that, this is the movie business that we're in. I'm not an indie filmmaker, as much as I admire that. So one of the things I'm excited about at Paramount is that we're doing a variety of movies. The meat and potatoes of what we do, as I said, are those big tent poles, but also there are movies that are for a more specific audience that shouldn't be done for the same price. Can we do that for a lower budget? And I find that exciting, to say, how can we do that? And I think that's part of where the technology comes in of what we do, that allows us now to say, are there ways to do it where we can be more flexible in how we approach these movies? And make it possible to tell lots of different stories.
That's smart.
I actually think this is one of the areas where we might have an advantage as a small independent studio rather than a huge studio like yours, because we represent directors for commercials, and so by its very nature we have to have a really varied offering of directors producing really different styles and telling really different stories, because that's what brings the work to us. So I think in a way, a lot of the things that we find hard because of our size, such as having the financial resources to put programs in place, it's expensive to mentor people and to be as supportive as we want to be, but actually I think that may be one of the areas where we have a little head start.
That's great. So to wrap things up, we talk about our goals for 2020 and what we want to achieve. Can you each tell me one goal? It can be anything. It could be a way of recruiting in a different way. It could be a different story that you want to tell. Some goal that you have for the next couple of years that pertains to gender parity and diversity.
I have a very personal goal, which is that I would like to set up a mentorship program for all our female staff.
That's great.
And I'm not quite sure how to do it yet. I was hoping to get some ideas.
Maybe
today.
women in animation can help.
I've heard some good ideas today. But that is something that I really want to do, is to find a way of carving out the time for something specific like that.
That's great. All right.
You threw me when you added the gender parity and diversity, because I have goals as far as what I want to accomplish in the next couple of years. I think I agree. I mean, it's getting a female director on one of these movies, making sure that we have diverse crew. I mean, I was so impressed at lunch. Two things I was impressed today, many things today, but one, I was really inspired by the millennial panel. They're my hope for the future. Because I do think that a lot of the things that we have dealt with certainly as far as being the only woman in the room and being the only diverse person in the room, I think that is changing. And when I hear them talk and how they see things, I think that will go away by nature of who they are. But the other thing is I was really impressed at lunch, and I am so sorry, I can't remember his name, the Canadian commissioner of the Canadian Film Festival, who said that was inspired, and I have to tell Michael Fukushima, who said, and I have to call John Landgraf and tell him this, that he was inspired by him, because he said that John Landgraf, who heads up FX, made it a very specific goal. I think Julianne, thank you, spoke about it this morning, right? So they heard that, and all of the animation studios in Canada decided that they were going to do that, and they did it like a year earlier than their goal, which is just like unbelievably a whole country managed to do what we're like struggling over in the United States, but they got a better prime minister. So, sorry. Sorry. But it really, I was so inspired by it, that it really, it gives me hope.
Definitely. Andrea?
I don't think I can top the Prime Minister.
Sorry.
It's mentorship. I mean, it's really getting out there and mentoring and being in the schools, but also the people inside are. And it's, if we had to do a give back, in my head, we're going to give, what I'm hoping is, I'll say 10%, that we're going to take the time. We're going to carve out time in people's lives on deadlines to actually do this. And so the 10% will grow into 20%, because the people that come into this business, I truly believe, are passionate about what they do, and they are artists, so they want to share. We all want to help each other, so let's just do that and make it, give it enough air and space so that they can. So it's the 10%, hopefully 20% mentorship.
And Jenny, you guys seem ahead of the game, but is there any specific goal you guys can, or you personally could cite?
Getting the bigger budgets to females.
That's
I think
important.
is one.
Yeah, definitely.
And also having this kind of seminar with female directors or scriptwriters. They can talk about their work, not just as female directors, but as their work and as their vision. So they don't have to represent a gender, but they represent and talk about their work.
That's awesome. Guys, thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you.
Oops. Yes. Quick, you want me to wait, or should I? We could also do it while you're talking.
People are leaving, you should talk.
Yes. Everybody, thank you very much for coming. Hope you had a good day and learned a lot and are motivated and inspired.
Yeah, and we wanted to add that tomorrow we start our breakfast. Each morning during the festival, you can come to the Brasserie du Parc. Each of you has in his a bag the document with all the program of our breakfast and the address and itinerary for the brasserie. You can attend the breakfast discussions, and tomorrow a very important discussion about how to start your own association, because lots of people want to start in their own countries an association like Women in Animation and Les Femmes s'animent, and we would be so happy that it happens. So please come and visit and attend to this breakfast. And also the other days we have fantastic breakfast with the Brazilian people attending the festival, and also lots of other talks the other days. Thank you.
And right now we're having drinks and a mixer out in the lobby, so please come and join us. Bring your questions, socialize with participants, and thank you very much. Oh, well done. That was really great. Oh, I'm sorry.